Another reason for calling with King Jack high on that flop, not just because it's the best hand a lot of the time, but also because when you do turn a king or a jack, and the other player is probably going to continue to barrel to represent hands that have the smaller pairs beat. If they put you on, calling with a 4 or a 3 on the flop, and a king hits the turn, they think they might be able to barrel you off because they're never going to put you on, just calling with 2 overs, no draw on the flop really very often. It just it's not something that is really going through their hand range in their head too often when you do call. Um, and for the times they have ace high, you can end up bluffing river like I did and represent something. It's definitely very possible. That's one thing I talk about a lot is if you're playing against better people at higher stakes, you can represent a lot more hands by calling than you can by raising. It's a very important concept. If you're playing very low stakes games, I would not recommend this strategy. I would not recommend calling with nothing, hoping that they're going to continue to barrel off. That's not it's not a viable strategy against someone who isn't a good player. What you want to be doing at smaller stakes is just pretty much being tight aggressive and going for value every time you have a hand. Playing super aggressive in position and don't get fancy. I think that's one thing that ruins people's win rates at smaller stakes is they do fancy things too often and then they get upset when they get called by a really bad hand. And it's like, well, they called you with bottom pair because they're a player who doesn't like folding. Just makes sense. I did flop top set, which I'm just gonna be betting. I want to keep the aggressiveness going against Corey Leenug, and he does call, which is good news at least. He tank called. I'm gonna be betting again. I'm betting out a number, hopefully, that he's willing to raise over the top of. I could check turn, but so yeah, I'm just going for crazy max value. He check calls. I'm just gonna keep barreling. I think the bet on the larger side is good, and I'm gonna bet like a weird number. So hopefully he just puts me on air. Huge big number. Obviously, it would super suck if he had 6-7, but a hand this strong, I'm just going to be trying to get as much value as possible. And if he ever has a king, he might just try and hero call or even, yeah, okay. I just want a huge pot against him. So those are spots that I'm talking about that I was trying to set up. Yeah, you're not going to flop top set very often, but for how aggressive I had been, I can just keep barreling flop, turn, and river and getting called by lighter. Whereas if I was playing really tight against him, that would have never set up that way. That's one reason why when you're short-handed, you do need to be aggressive because in a four-handed game like this, everyone's paying attention, right? So if a player's playing really tight, they're just not going to get value for their hands because people are going to recognize. If you're playing at a 9 or 10-handed table, maybe people won't recognize that you've been the tightest player at the table. That happens a lot. However, when you're playing short, everyone kind of knows who they're up against and what's going on, the player dynamics, especially at a higher limit like this. And you want to set yourself up in good situations where you can get value and you have real hands and where your bluffs are actually going to work too. I've been playing such a wide range where my bluffs can work on certain boards that I can represent, whereas if you're playing really tight, it's just not going to happen very often. So he's still not really abusing a 4-bet at all, and I'm going to keep that 31 3-bet going. I'm going to keep trying to put Leenug in hard spots. If he does 4-bet, I'm going to probably fold, even though he's, I'm sure, tilting a little bit after calling 3-13 on the river. So I flop nut diamonds. There's really no reason for me to be checking this, especially if he decides to bluff raise flop or raise flop with a worse diamond draw. He leads, which is kind of worrisome. Last time he led and I raised, he folded. However, given the way that the way that we've been playing, he kind of expects me to be aggressive, I think, and not fold. I mean, I just don't think he would expect me to fold a flop of that size bet. And now he leads into me again, and I'm gonna be raising, hoping that he has an 8. I'm gonna make it 195. That might be too large. 165.